chapter 3, verse 20. Just after he had chosen his disciples in verses 13 to 19, it says he came home. He had gone up, according to verse 13, to the mountain, summoned his disciples to basically get them established. He needed the privacy. And now he comes back home to Capernaum, to the house of Simon and Andrew, who were brothers. That was his home base in his ministry in Galilee. He came home, and the crowd gathered again to such an extent that they could not even eat a meal. Mobs of people around him. We saw that, didn't we? In the case of the paralytic, because they couldn't get him to Jesus, they took the roof apart to lower him. This introduces us to an amazing encounter with Jesus that I want you to understand. It's very, very definitive. And it will help us understand how to understand Christ, how to identify him. You have only 3 options, and we'll show you that from this text. But let me start with the one option you don't have when it comes to Jesus, and the one that most people would affirm. It would be this: Jesus is a good man, a religious man, a spiritual man, a gifted teacher, a great preacher, a wise man, a moral leader, a virtuous example. I mean, that is generally the typical favorable view of Jesus that is just generally pervade. He's a good man, a good teacher, a wise man. Even Islam says that, a prophet. But you don't have that option. That is not at all a possible option. You say, why? For one particular reason. Jesus said he was God. Did you get that? He said he was God. I and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I do what the Father does. He made claims to be God. He said, before Abraham was, I am. He declared himself to be the I am, the eternal one. That eliminated the possibility that he's a good teacher, because good teachers don't say they're God. Crazy people do. This is not a possibility. He claimed to be God in human flesh. He claimed to be eternal. He claimed to have the same nature as God, the same will as God, the same power as God. Good teachers, wise men, truth tellers, moral leaders don't claim to be God. So we'll eliminate that as a possibility. And that wipes out all the pandering liberal views of Jesus that put him in that category. You don't have that option. There are 3 possibilities, and they are laid out in this text. Here are your 3 options. 1, he was delusional. 2, he was demonic. Or 3, he was divine. Those are the only options. And they play out in this wonderful text. Let's consider the first one. That Jesus was delusional. That he was deranged mentally. That he was in some way insane, out of his mind. A lunatic. And we come to that option right away in verse 21. Jesus had come back to Capernaum, The crowds were there again. They couldn't even eat a meal. There were such crushing crowds. And then verse 21, when his own people heard of this. What do you mean his own people? Literally, those of him, his family. His family. When they heard of this, they went out to take custody of him, for they were saying, he has lost his senses. He's delusional. That was the attitude of Jesus' family, that he was mentally off. He comes back to his base in Capernaum. The crowds are all there. They're restrictive. They're interfering. They're overwhelming him. He pulls away in verses 13 and following to spend some time getting the disciples going. He comes back in verse 20, and there the crowd is again. And why are they there? Because he could cast out demons and heal all diseases. That's why they were there. They dogged his steps because they wanted the miracles. They wanted the deliverance. And then his family hears about it, that he's back. And so they went to essentially to do an intervention, to use contemporary lingo. They have to go get him. What it says in verse 21 actually is they went to take custody of him. Literally, they went to seize him. This was not going to be a conversation. This was going to be a severe intervention. His family was embarrassed. His family was fearful for his well-being. And they thought he had lost his mind. 30 years of living in that home in Nazareth, that relatively small village, 30 years of quiet, 30 years of silence as far as ministry is concerned. There's only one occasion do we know anything about those 30 years, and that was when he was 12 years of age, and he went to Jerusalem with his family, and he was asking some theological questions in the temple. There's no record of any teaching or any miracles of any kind for 30 years.